It's rapid fire time.
Yes. Let's go.
Let's
go.
Okay. So we'll stick on the Marcus Freeman topic. I've heard some people refer to Marcus Freeman's coaching style as, quote, a cheerleader approach. What do you think about that?
That's very interesting. I never really thought of him that way as like a cheerleading coach. He was always kind of a,
he's out there rah rah and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, yeah. I guess that's kind of a synonym for players coach. You know what I mean? That he kind of he wants what's best for the players, and he's always there, and we're the best friends and making the videos and stuff like that. And I could see that, I guess, but that's more, to me, that's more of his outside the program persona as opposed to what we see at practice. And I think what the players see behind closed doors.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's really how he is with the players, but I do think that is how he's viewed outside of the Goog by a lot of people. So, I mean, I get it. I guess it makes sense, but I don't think that that's really his personality when it comes to teaching the kids how to play the game.
Brian Kelly had very little personal relationships with his players, and he had purple face.
Yeah.
Marcus Freeman has, deep connections with his players. He doesn't have purple face. Some people see him maybe, again, as a little too rah-rah. I think that, one, he's 36 years old, and the trend, this trend has been going on for several years now.
Absolutely.
Younger coaches.
Sean McVay.
Sean McVay, the guy in Miami, I can't think of his name right now, but had a very successful, debut. Even, Sean McDermott in Buffalo, he's young. Sure. You look at baseball, like Alex Cora, all these different guys. Younger coaches, deeper connections with the players.
Sure.
Like, like Brian Kelly is like the classic, older school approach,
he's the old guard,
nose, hands off, like, I played high school sports in the 80s. We virtually had no personal relationships with any of our coaches, even the assistants. Everyone just seemed like much more ancient and older than us. There was never any of that. Everything was, coach them hard-nosed, all this kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot different now. There are like the interpersonal relationships that Marcus Freeman has. It's like at the one time you're praising him because he's able to go out there and make these connections with high school kids and get these big, high school recruits. But then when you lose a couple of games, well, it's the wrong approach to have.
Right.
You're too close to the players. You're too rah-rah. Like you said, like we've seen him, he was never walking around practice when we were there, rah-rah, hand clapper, cheering and all that kind of stuff. He was in there, he was in there coaching. And then there were times when we were walking out of practice, I think it was the very first day where, he had to have, kind of a look, guys, we can't have we can't have guys puking and unable to finish practice, at the end of practice. We got to have you here. It's got to be, all those different things. So just because maybe the image that you have is one thing doesn't mean that he's not actually getting his hands dirty in their coaching. So I think it's a mischaracterization of who Marcus Freeman is as a coach. Just because you have good relationships with your players doesn't mean you're not coaching them hard as well.
I completely agree with you. And that's, I never questioned his boundary between being a player's coach and being a coach who is respected. You know, and that's the key. If your players respect you, they're going to listen to you and they're going to learn from you and all of that. And you can still have a relationship with those players. It's a fine line to walk. Don't get me wrong. But I always felt like he walked that line pretty darn well, to be honest with you. And again, even in the Vegas video, they kind of made a joke about it.
Right.
Because, he's doing these like, wait, guys, I'm
your coach, not your friend. Yeah.
Right. I mean, they made a joke about it, but I do think that he does walk that line very well. And it's a fine line, but I think he does a good job with it. I do. So I don't think that that's because again, like you said, you can't have it both ways. He's a dynamic recruiter because he develops relationships with these kids on the recruiting trail. You can't just shut that down when they come on campus.
Right.
I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't, well, you're here. I'm
Now
not
you're a
talking to
different
you
guy.
anymore.
It's like, oh, you're on my time now, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't have it both ways. Otherwise, those guys are gonna be like, you know what? I'm out of here. They're gonna just leave and they're gonna transfer and all of these different things. So I think he does a good job of showing his genuine self to players and prospective players and all of that. But when it's time to be coached, he's a coach and he coaches them up at practice. So
Yep.
I think he does actually a good job of that. Maybe what he's coaching, maybe we got to work on. But other than that, I think he does a good job with that.
Fill in the blank. Notre Dame's goal for the rest of this season is now blank.
Well, I think the goal has to be New Year's 6. Because look, you're going to if you're setting a goal, it's something you want to achieve, right? Is that a realistic goal? I'll let you know maybe Saturday about 7:00 whether that's a realistic goal or not, because I need to see this team play a heck of a lot better than they did last Saturday. And they're going to have to continue getting better and better and better when the likes of the Clemsons and the BYUs and the USCs, et cetera, right? So, but I think as of right now, that has to be your goal. New Year's 6 has to be your goal, because I think realistically, a 9-3 or 10-2 team can be a New Year's 6 team, because they pluck the top 4 teams out of the New Year's 6, and so now you've got other opportunities to get yourself in there. And there's still it's still Notre Dame. There's still eyeballs, and when they've got at-large opportunities, if a bowl has an opportunity to select Notre Dame, they're going to do it, right? So I think 9-3, 10-2 still get you into a New Year's 6, and I think that's the goal right now.
No, I think you're right about that, but you have 10 games to go, and so the margin for error obviously becomes much more slim. And BYU's looking pretty good. BYU beat Baylor last weekend, and they're looking. That's not a team to be overlooked. So I mean, you definitely have 3 games that are going to be tough.
Absolutely.
On the schedule. To me, it's now this is the floor. The goal for to look like the football team that you thought you were coming into this season, not just to look like it, to play like it. Like the 2 lines, and I do think that it starts there, especially since that was such a big emphasis for Marcus Freeman coming into the season. They have to look a lot more competent. Going back to what we were talking about earlier with what Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees thought this team was. Mm-hmm. What's this offensive line right now? Like, we saw this offensive line during camp. It is baffling that line has looked like what it has looked like. And we were all heaping all this praise on Harry Hiestand, and we thought it was deservedly so. But what we've seen from that unit so far has been very disappointing. What we've seen from the defensive line, Al Washington's group, has been very disappointing. So, to me, it starts with that. If you can become more physical and play to a higher standard with both of those lines, both sides of the football, what you were just talking about is going to take care of itself, I think, ultimately.
Yeah.
Now, you can't go out there on Saturday and try to be a smash mouth football team just because that's what you want to do. You have to be realistic with what you are. Maybe you have to, grow to that level. But to me, it starts with that. Play to that standard, on both of those fronts, and the big picture stuff is ultimately going to take care of itself, I think.
No, I like that a lot. And you're absolutely right, because you need to have season-long goals, and you also need to have, shorter-term goals that will get you to your long-term goal, right? And I think that was a great explanation of, okay, we got to do this, and this before we can worry about that, right? So I think that's a really good point. I was looking at it as more like, hey, what's our end goal? But
sure.
you're
I got you.
Yeah, you're 100% right. You've got to do a lot of things in order to get to that point. And again, the margin for error for what I said the goal should be is razor thin. It's razor thin. You have to, not only do you have to compete in these games, you got to win them. You got to win them if you want that to be your goal. I mean, there's plenty of people out there in the chat and elsewhere, they're going to say, oh, the goal is 6-6. It's to be bowl eligible, after what we've seen from the first 2 games. I get where you're coming from. So far, they haven't even shown me that they're even worth being in a bowl, let alone a New Year's 6 bowl. So is it pie in the sky to think that they're going to make a New Year's 6 bowl? Maybe, especially after what we've seen. But it's still a goal that you can have that is attainable because of what you still have in front of you. That's
Yeah.
my point. You know what I mean? Even if it's lofty, it's still a goal you can achieve if you do everything you need to do.
Yep. Another fill in the blank. Here's a tweet from Drew Tranquil after the loss to Marshall Saturday. Here's what Drew Tranquil said. I remember back in 2018 when we barely beat Ball State. We went on to go 12-0 that year. Today, it's the flip side of the coin. One bad day in the office doesn't have to define the season. Tough times go away. Tough people don't. Embarrassing, but I can't wait to see the response. Vince, that's blank.
100% accurate. Because I'm more referring to the last part. I mean, you can't really compare an almost loss, which was a victory, an almost loss to what happened on Saturday. Because
yeah,
we talk about Ball State and we talk about
one is a
how
loss, one isn't.
they weren't prepared for it, but they still won the game, right?
Right.
I mean, so it's hard for me to compare the two because they're not going to go 12-0. At best, they're going to go 10-2, right? So you can't really compare that top stuff. The bottom part of this, I completely agree with you. Tough times go away. Tough people don't. It's embarrassing, but I can't wait to see the response. That part I'm on board with because I can't wait to see the response as well because there has to be one. And there's going to be a response. Is it going to be a positive response or is it going to be a negative response? It's going to be one of the two. I can't wait to see the response either. So I think that last part is 100% accurate with what he said.
And you're right about that first part because you can't compare an almost loss to a loss because it basically comes down to what we were talking about before. No matter how much you might despise Brian Kelly now, they didn't play to their standard, but they still found a way to win. Notre Dame didn't play to its standard Saturday against Marshall, but they couldn't find a way to win.
Yeah.
Like the tailspin continued and things got worse. What the response is going to be, I am really, really curious to see because, again,
me too.
We've never seen Marcus Freeman in this situation before because Marcus Freeman has not been a head coach before. And that's what I do want to see what the response is.
Sure.
Are they going to figure out a way to turn this thing around? Because it's not like it's never happened before, but because we were all here 6 years ago, we saw what 2016 turned into. Now, the roster, everything else, there's nothing that points us to saying that's what this is going to turn into, but what is the response going to be? I really do want to see what the response is going to be.
Yes, absolutely. Because there needs to be one. I mean, there needs to be a response, and there's going to be one. But man,
oh man,
we'll see.
Okay, now this next question is less a question than there's going to be a lot to it. Did you do your homework?
I did. Not as much as I wanted to, but I did do my homework, and I definitely have an opinion.
So we all know NBC. Now, we were at the game Saturday, but we recorded the game on NBC. We have watched parts of it back, more for X's and O's and stuff like that, less for, Jack Collinsworth and Jason Garrett doing the commenting.
Right.
I was going to actually, because of the fact that, they lost to Marshall, I was going to save this for next week. But then Andrew Marchand, who covers sports media for the New York Post and is the co-host of the Marchand and Oran Sports Media podcast, he basically did a review, a critique of the new Jack Collinsworth, Jason Garrett booth. And this is more about Jack Collinsworth than it is Jason Garrett. But so here's what Marchand had to say. And I'll try to kind of go through. Do you want to go through this point by point, or do you want me to kind of like just breeze, get through most of the points and then we can discuss it?
Why don't you breeze through it and then we'll talk about it at the end?
Okay. So these are Marchand's words on Jack Collinsworth, the 27-year-old Notre Dame grad who is now NBC's Notre Dame football play-by-play announcer. Quote, Jack Collinsworth's last name and the NBC family lineage surely didn't hurt him getting the Notre Dame play-by-play job, but he struggled Saturday as much as the Fighting Irish, who were upset by Marshall. Let's address it all. And again, these are Marchand's words that I'm reading here. 1, this is a big-time role that NBC's president of production, Sam Flood, entrusted to a 27-year-old in Collinsworth. Now he goes on, he talks about how basically Mike Tirico had the job and Tirico moved on. He had Drew Brees last year and that kind of thing. And now the analyst, Collinsworth's partner, is former Cowboys coach Jason Garrett. And Tirico is now, of course, working with Collinsworth's father,
Right.
Chris Collinsworth. Again, now I'll read this directly. Quote, when you're 27 years old, haven't done a ton of play-by-play, and have a big last name, there's going to be scrutiny and even charges of nepotism. Notre Dame on NBC is not on-the-job training. It is the big leagues. Again, this is from Marchand. 4, Collinsworth didn't sound like a national TV play-by-player. His few reps showed in his lack of command. He had a habit of saying mm-hmm at times and felt a step slow on calls. In the big moments, he didn't exclaim and resonate. He didn't sound like someone who is fully in charge, which makes sense because he lacks play-by-play experience. I'll skip past some of this other stuff where he's talking about, similar guys like Kenny Albert and Joe Buck. They had dads who were in the booth and that kind of stuff. It's not necessarily as relevant, but it's, then he says, Jack Collinsworth is fine as a reporter on NBC's Sunday Night Football. He may not be Bob Costas, but he doesn't feel out of place. On Saturday, Collinsworth failed to tell the stories of Marshall and the upset and connect the right words and tone on the game's biggest plays. The broadcast felt uneven. So those are Andrew Marchand. Again, he covers sports media extensively. He's on top of, all this kind of stuff. What do you think of the review there and that Andrew Marchand gave Jack Collinsworth in his first game?
Well, one of his points, I thought he was a little too nice, to be honest with you, because when he was talking about him being, a reporter for Sunday Night Football, he said he may not be Bob Costas, but he doesn't feel out of place. I still felt like he felt out of place. Like I'm sorry. It didn't, and maybe it's because I've seen him on the Notre Dame broadcasts and maybe I'm biased in a negative fashion because, he got the job working, on the Notre Dame broadcast because of who he is before that. And that's what got him the job on Sunday Night Football.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just never all that impressed with him, even being on the sidelines or at the halftime or pregame or whatever he was doing. Right. So I thought that was nice. I didn't, because I don't feel that way at all. I do think he feels choppy. I do feel like it's inexperience. I mean, that's what it is. And it's nothing against what maybe he will be in 10 years. It's what he is now. And having him be the play-by-play guy for Notre Dame football, which is your flagship college football situation at NBC, and it just felt like an afterthought to me. And I just don't think he carried the torch very well for himself. I just was not all that impressed. And and to kind of escalate that a little bit, the relationship between him and Garrett felt forced. It didn't feel smooth.
Because it is, think of the fact that
absolutely,
if Mike Tirico was still there, Jason Garrett is now working with one of the best play-by-play announcers in the country, who has 3-4 decades of experience doing that job, versus a guy who is, not half of his age, but probably a good 20 or so years younger than him, and is just as inexperienced as him.
He has 2 rookies trying to work together. And look, I'd love to go back into the vault and sound, hear what you and I sounded like when we first started, but you were a pro and you were able to bring me along to where now we have a really good working relationship. This is completely different. Like, Jack does not have the time under his belt to bring Jason Garrett along. And that's because there's a lot of green color guys that are out there. It's a lot of former athletes or coaches or whatever.
But they're typically, especially if you're jumping into a network booth like this, you are going to have a play-by-play guy who is much more experienced and can.
Correct.
Basically, the play-by-play guy needs to be the point guard, especially on TV.
Yes.
He needs to be the point guard for the analyst. He needs to set him up on TV. TV is much like we talk about Tony Romo. We talk about Troy Aikman. We talk about all these different analysts. On TV, the play-by-play guy, because you have the picture, the play-by-play guy there is there to set up the analyst. On radio, it is 80% the play-by-play guy. The
Mhm.
analyst gets in when he can because the radio guy has to describe as much as possible. Like even
Correct.
Jack Collinsworth, like to me, he talked too much. Like he needed to lay out more often to let Jason Garrett get in and describe more. Like Collinsworth kept there was too much detail basically because we can see what's going on. You know, like there
Right.
was a blitz that Ramon Henderson had. It was like a third down. It
Yep.
basically, third down, Notre Dame brings the heat, Ramon Henderson, that kind of thing, because Henderson ended up with the sack. That's what it needed to be. But instead, there was too much and then he would talk after the play, and Jason Garrett doesn't get a chance to get in and really, be the analyst. And to me, it had the feel more, instead of NBC network TV, it had more a Big Ten network FS1 level quality because of the fact that you're talking about a 27-year-old who literally the most football, as far as I can tell, what I've been able to, the research that I've done, and I, did look around quite a, he's worked at ESPN and some other places, but the most football play-by-play that he had was this past summer when these two guys did USFL games together. He's getting to cut his TV, as Marchand said. This is a big job, but he's getting to cut his teeth doing Notre Dame football on NBC. Now,
absolutely,
he's good enough, and if good enough is what the Notre Dame job on NBC shouldn't be about good enough. It should be about, you should have, think about the people who have sat in that seat before. It's not good enough.
No, I completely agree with you. And they were rookie mistakes. You know what I mean? Because it's different. Like you said, it's different to call radio versus TV. And it felt like he was calling radio as opposed to TV. It's a completely different feel to it, but it's still, even saying that, it still felt choppy to me.
Yeah.
It just felt choppy. And if you're a rookie color guy, you need a veteran play-by-play guy to pull you along and, help you out and get you into where you need to get your points in and all of that. Like, and even then it takes
Collinsworth
time
is trying to figure that out himself right now.
Exactly. And that's the problem. You've got two rookies learning on the job. That doesn't work. It doesn't work.
And you're right. Maybe 10 years down the line, he's going to end up being a really good play-by-play guy, or even 5 years down the line, or whatever. But he should be cutting his teeth over on, doing ESPN Plus game, and that's, I would compare it to that as well, because ESPN Plus even has, like student quality, student broadcasters a lot of times. It's just like, this is a guy who hasn't gone out and cut his teeth in a place where basically nobody cares. Like when I was coming through college and we, learning play-by-play and all this stuff, I can't think of his name right now. The guy who used to do college football for ABC. Why can't I think of his name? Basically, he talked to one of our classes one time, and he basically, the basic gist of what he was saying is, you've got to go out, you've got to go off the grid, and you cut your teeth. You get your reps in places that there aren't a whole lot of people paying attention. But that's not what, Jack Collinsworth is cutting his teeth on national TV right now. And all of his mistakes are going to be there every week for people. And if this season keeps spiraling the way that it's spiraling right now, Keith Jackson. I don't know why I couldn't think. I was thinking granddaddy of them all and all these different things, but I couldn't think of.
I was going to ask you if that's who it was, but yeah. No, but you're absolutely right. And he got the job because of who. I look, when it comes to nepotism, quote unquote, and getting a job because of who your parents are, I don't necessarily have a problem with that if you are good at your job. I mean, some people have an in because of who their parents are. That's just a fact, no doubt about it. But I want you to be good at your job too, and a lot of career moves and stuff are all about opportunity. And sometimes you can get different opportunities based on who you are. It is what it is. Tori Spelling had a great career because of who her dad was. You know what I mean? I don't know why I came up with that, but that was what came into my head. So yes, it can open doors for you, but you shouldn't get jobs you don't deserve and aren't good at.
Well, and that's, there was a lot of criticism of Joe, but, there's always been criticism of Joe Buck, but, that was a criticism of him getting a network job early on as well. But Joe Buck, he didn't walk into the number one booth,
right?
Even because he had that name, Jack, and being the son of Jack Buck, he didn't walk into that number one booth right off the street. He cut his teeth. He did other things. And even when he got the first network job, he wasn't front and center on that network right away. He grew into that, turned into the number one guy. Basically, he earned his stripes. He proved that he deserved to be there. Maybe Collinsworth does that. But, I agree with Marchand, right now, he just doesn't have that authoritative voice in this booth, between the two, I'm not the biggest Jason Garrett fan because of, my Cowboys background, but between the two, Jason Garrett did the better job, because he knows his stuff when it comes to football.
Exactly. And that's what you want from a color guy, So I will say the bar is set lower for a color guy than it is for a play-by-play guy, just because
you expect
what
that
the job
he's the jock, and that he's going to have to learn on the job.
Absolutely correct. I expect not perfection, but I expect, professionalism and all of that from an experience from my play-by-play guy. Yeah. So it's disappointing, but it is what it is, I guess.
I mean, we'll see. We'll check in on
hopefully
this.
He gets better.
Season. Yeah, we'll check at the end of the season. See how it goes.
The parallels between Marcus Freeman getting a job without the experience and Jack Collinsworth getting the job without the experience and it being Notre Dame. Believe me, the parallels are not lost on me now.
That's true. Very true.
Hopefully they both get better by the end of the season.
Yes. Exactly. All right, so last night's Monday Night Football game had another rookie head coach. The Broncos were trailing 17-16, a little bit more than a minute to play in the fourth quarter. So they're down by a point. Russell Wilson completes a short pass. They end up with the ball at the Seattle 46. They had all three timeouts. It's 4th and 5. Rather than go for it, try to convert the first down with all three timeouts and, maybe set up a manageable field goal, Broncos rookie head coach Nathaniel Hackett lets the game clock wind all the way down to 20 seconds before finally calling a timeout. And then he brings Russell Wilson off the field and they try a 64-yard field goal to try to win the game. The field goal, of course, misses. So do you buy or sell that as the right call, Vince?
That was literally the worst thing that you could have done in that particular scenario. The worst thing you could have possibly done. Number one, the third down got over with about 50 seconds to go, I want to say. First of all, you're going to call timeout right then and there, okay?
Right.
So you at least have 50 seconds to work with. Second of all, I'm going for it on 4th and 5 because if you get it, you're still in the ball game. You still have probably over 40 seconds to play, and you still have 2 timeouts, okay?
Right.
If you don't get it, you turn the ball over. They're just going to put knees on it. It's game over anyway, okay? Or you turn it over. You still have 2 timeouts. Oh, man, maybe you get the ball back. You never know. But the bottom line is you call timeout right away. You go for it. I trust Russell Wilson. He's the 10-year veteran who's made a lot of fourth quarter comebacks. I trust him to get a 4th and 5, if I'm being honest. And then you've got the whole rest of the way to go. You need probably another 10 yards for a makeable field goal, and then you go from there. The worst thing you could have possibly done is let the time tick all the way down and try to kick a 64-yard field goal with a kicker who hasn't kicked over 50 yards in like 6 years.
I guess it just dawned on me. Brian's the Broncos fan. We should have had him on here.
Oh.
It's not, but it's like you mentioned Russell Wilson. You just got Russell Wilson in the offseason, and now he's back in his old stomping grounds. He's the guy with you got him for that situation. That's why you got Russell Wilson, not to try to kick a 64-yard field goal. And then after they miss the field goal and Seattle gets the ball back, then Hackett decides when Geno Smith is taking a knee, now he's going to start using his timeouts. Like what is that? What are you accomplishing by calling timeout in that? It's just, it's ridiculous that you would rather put the game on the foot of a no-name kicker than put the ball in Russell Wilson's hands with all 3 timeouts, let him try to get a first down. And again, at the very worst case, if you get a first down, you're trying a shorter field goal. It made absolutely zero sense to me that was your answer, a 64-yard field goal.
And I'm watching the Manning cast at the end of the game, and Peyton Manning is up in the corner. They've got him like, just their heads or whatever. And he's like, you got timeout. And he's just going like the other guys are talking, and he's just going like this over and over and over again.
Right.
It's like, why are you not calling timeout? It was unfathomable to me that he didn't call timeout. It's like, what are you waiting for?
Yeah.
I didn't get it. That felt too obvious to me, which is why it's so hard to watch.
And again, like if Notre Dame had lost the Marshall game and we substituted like Marcus Freeman for Nathaniel Hackett, like if Marcus Freeman had made this kind of decision, then we're having a different conversation today about whether or not this guy is suited to be a head coach.
100%.
I think, right?
100%. Absolutely. If it came down to a decision like that, you're like, what are you doing? Like you don't need to be there. You don't need to be there.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that would have been horrible. Yeah, it would not have been a good look.
Yep. All right, last question tonight. Albert Pujols plans to retire at the end of the season. As we speak, he currently has 697 home runs.
And he's been on fire lately.
He has. So maybe, this question is going to be moot by the end of the week, but we are sitting here, in the middle of April right now. Let's say the season ends and he's sitting on 699 home runs. Should Pujols come back for one more year if he's sitting on 699 at the end of the season?
Kind of like Mr. 3000. You come back to get your 3 hits or whatever it was. Because they took.
I think Siri wants to chime in on this. She was just talking.
It's funny. I mean, it's a number or whatever. But to say that you had 700 home runs in Major League Baseball, that'd be a pretty cool number to achieve. I would talk to the Cardinals. Like, hey, how about you let me be your DH for a few games until I get that 1 home run or whatever.
And then I'll retire.
And then I'm out. I will, head off into the sunset, whatever. Maybe I'm being petty when it comes to the number or whatever. But when you're so close to kind of a milestone like that, it'd be hard to walk away with 699. It just would for me. I don't know. I think you should consider it.
Yeah. Or, maybe he just, like DHs for home games or something.
Yeah.
Like something like that. I think he's going to end up, like you said, the way he's swinging the bat right now, he's got 2 weeks to do it. All he needs is 3 more home runs. But, who knows? Maybe the pressure gets to him a little bit. I don't think I could walk away, especially, he's 42 years old. Allegedly, there've always been those rumors that maybe he's older than what he says that he is. But to sit on 699 after the career that he had, I think you've got to come back if he doesn't get to 700. Yeah. Baseball is such a numbers driven game, especially with those home runs. And he's a guy who has never been linked to steroids as well. I don't think that you could walk away. And if he were to come back, even the way he's swinging the bat right now, even if he does get over 700, I would think that there would be some incentive to try to be the guy, to say, because the other guys who have passed that 715, they have not been, they have not been free of the PED allegations.
Yeah.
I guess let's put it that way.
Absolutely.
No, that's a good point.
That's a good point, which makes it even
he could
better.
Be the clean guy.
Yeah, I would consider it. Why not? I mean, the Cardinals are usually in contention. So, I mean, I know every roster spot is legit and you need every roster spot. So, I mean, there is that. It'd be one thing if he was like playing for the Pirates or something. But so, I mean, that has to be taken into consideration. Well, that's the thing too. Like, would
it be with the Cardinals?
Yeah, right.
Would they want him back and all those different kind of things?
I will also say that if it's either retire as a Cardinal and not get to 700 or come back next year with like the Marlins or something like that, I'm retiring as a Cardinal. So
Yeah,
I put that
that's true, too.
caveat on it.
It would have to be the situation. Yeah, like you know, if it's the Yankees,
Right.
like you even and not the Cardinals, because like if it goes to New York, he's going to have a chance to hit Mondo home runs and all that.
It's true.
Yeah, like if you're going to come back with the Pirates or the Marlins, that's a different situation.
Exactly. I would want to if I'm Albert, I want to retire as a Cardinal because that's where he kind of made his name and his hay and all that.
Yeah.
I would want to retire as a Cardinal. It's why he came back to St. Louis in the first place. So if they're not open to it, then it is what it is. I didn't do what I needed to do in the amount of time that I had. So,
all right, Vince. Well, I'm going to have to wrap it up. I got to get heading out over to Notre Dame because again, we've got those post-practice interviews. Tommy Reese,
sir.
Al Golden are both going to be coming out. Drew Pine's going to be out for that matter as well. So we've got kind of a who's who out there.
That's right.
Tonight.
So let me know how that goes, buddy.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks for jumping on early tonight. And I guess have a good rest of the week.
That's right.
We've got the mailbag coming up tomorrow, but tons of content coming up for the rest of the week here on IB Nation Sports Talk. Rate, review, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We appreciate it as always, and we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.